This is exactly what we needed to hear, as Craig Berube has spoken out about the upcoming season for the Toronto Maple Leafs and has revealed his plans for the team's success, and also said some very interesting things that has Leafs fans fired up. So stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we do, if you're part of the percentage that aren't subscribed to the channel, about 70% of you aren't subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to Darius and myself, as we're on the road now to 13,000 subscribers, and this is the place to be for the daily Leafs news. But Darius, we have a lot to go over today, and Craig Berube has spoken out and revealed some very interesting plans, some details. And if you're a Leafs fan, you're going to want to listen to this and read this, because this is super exciting for you all. So let's just dive right into it. So the Chief, Craig Berube, gives us a little insight into his coaching plan for the upcoming season, and he said some very intriguing things here. So I'm going to dive right into the exact quote. So obviously, Craig Berube, we know what his kind of coaching style is for the team, and we've seen it in the past with the Blues and things like that. But he gave some insight. He said, we want a team that's hard to play against. We don't want to just outscore our problems. We want to play good, sound, structured, disciplined, hard hockey. And Darius, this is something that obviously the Leafs have wanted for a while. And Sheldon Keefe, as us fans now, we saw that this was something that we dreamed of for a long time. And it's finally nice to have a coach come out and say it, because obviously we know that the Leafs can, in theory, outscore their problems with all the skilled goal scorers, the best goal scorer in the NHL, and Austin Matthews. But we've seen year after year and years in the past that it doesn't work when it comes to playoff time, that you need to be disciplined. Something the Leafs certainly haven't been the past handful of years, and definitely weren't last season, despite their elite goal scoring ability and personnel that they have.
I'd argue that it doesn't work in the regular season either, right? And we've been subjected to that for the last, I don't know, 6 years, something like that, right? And, looking back at even last season, there were times that the Leafs, would go down 5-0. Yes, they score their way back into the game, but they still lose because of some of these problems, right? And the fact that they weren't defensively sound and structured as well as they could have been, at least. Obviously, you have offensive weapons, like you mentioned, like Austin Matthews, William Nylander are going to go off every year, and they'll be able to outscore your issues per se. Most of the time it doesn't work. But with this and these comments from Craig Berube, I'm really excited by this, honestly. Like, I am really into this. I love everything that he's said so far. And I believe that he's going to instill a bit of a new culture as well, like the mental side of the game as well. Never, not giving up on certain plays, because there were certain players the last little while in this era of Leafs that I personally couldn't stand either, the way they played and the way it was structured for them. So I'm glad that we're moving away from that, and everything Berube said so far, I'm on board with. And he also came out and said that he wants, some structure in the bottom of the lineup too. He wants some identity in the bottom of the lineup. And we've been talking a lot about the lineup and who might make the team. So for him to say that, some guys that you think may make the team may not, for that reason, because he wants the team structured a certain way and he wants to know exactly what he's going to get out of each line. And that's how you move forward in the playoffs as well, right? You need a defensively sound and structured team with, a couple of the lines at least having a defined purpose. And the Leafs have not had that in a long time. So it's going to be a fun season with Craig Berube coming out and saying this so far.
Yeah, and obviously we know that they signed a lot of veteran guys. They signed Chris Tanev, OEL. They got the blue line shored up. And we've been on record discussing how Craig Berube is probably playing a bigger part than a lot of us think, surrounding what additions they make, what trades they could potentially make, and what additions they made to the blue line. Obviously, Chris Tanev, OEL. And they're keeping Nick Robertson, which is something we can discuss as well in a minute. But you mentioned the defined roles. He wants veterans. We know that for sure. He wants players who can play defined roles, and maybe that's part of the reason they went with Max Pacioretty over some other young guys that they have in the Marley system, maybe even some other PTOs they could have signed. James Van Riemsdyk was a name that came up. Maybe as Craig Berube preferred the play style and the veteran leadership, even though James Van Riemsdyk is a veteran as well, but the leadership of Max Pacioretty, and that's probably played a pretty big reason, because we know that Brad Treliving is definitely in talks with Craig Berube about how you want this team to be. It's his first year as a coach. He is not a rookie coach. He is a very, very veteran coach who's won the Stanley Cup before. So it's very interesting. You see the exact quote: we want to be a team first. When I look at teams that win, it's always about the team and what's best for the team. It's not about individuals. We want to play aggressive, physical hockey. I like to have a heavy team, and we want to play fast. And when I say heavy, I don't mean running around and fighting people. Our team in St. Louis probably had the least number of fights in the NHL. We just played hard hockey, good in front and both sides of the net. So kind of makes sense there. And the Leafs have some guys who do that. You obviously have Ryan Reeves, not necessarily fighters. You have a very solid blue line now, and they've developed a blue line that I think can play well in front of Craig Berube. But it seems that his plan here is exactly what we and a lot of Leafs fans have been discussing for the past handful of years, And you look at some of the additions they made, Craig Berube, Lane Lambert, Mark Savard, and Mike Van Ryn all have their name on the cup as a coach or a player. This is extremely valuable when talking about the roles in getting us over the hump. And that is the reason that Brad Treliving in his second year let go of Sheldon Keefe. Keefe's a very good coach, but he lost the locker room to a degree. His play style wasn't working. And things like this is something we haven't heard from Keefe in really ever this directly. And now in the first year before Craig Berube has even coached a game, we're hearing the exact things we want to hear for this Toronto Maple Leafs team with all the star power and their studded team and studded lineup to actually make a run in the playoffs. And we're far away from that. We have to make the playoffs first, but it's very encouraging nonetheless as the season approaches here.
Yeah, and I think they will make the playoffs. They're way too good of a team not to. But like you mentioned, to touch on, like you did just a couple of minutes ago, like Brad Treliving is not signing guys blindly. He's not going into offseason or into free agency and just like signing guys that he think may play well on the Leafs, right? Obviously, he's having meetings with Craig Berube and guys that he think would make a difference on his team or that he can utilize on the team. So I think Pacioretty, of course, is probably, I'm sure that they like what, both of them like what Pacioretty brings to the table, but I'm sure it was a lot of Craig Berube as well saying, this is a player that I want on my team, and I think he can help in that way. And, other guys, like you mentioned that Berube also said he wants a heavier team and guys who play a heavy style of hockey. I'm excited to see what a guy like Matthew Knies can do under Craig Berube now, because I feel like he was underutilized in certain ways and situations with Sheldon Keefe. And of course, that's done now. So I'm excited to see what happens moving forward with a guy like Matthew Knies, especially in the playoffs. But even the regular season, he had a decent season last year. But how can he be used in a different way this year? Because, we saw him used very one-dimensionally last year. There wasn't too much fiddling around with things, at least in terms of Matthew Knies in the lineup. And they have a couple other guys too, like Max Domi has some of that to his game as well. He's not the biggest guy, but he has that in his game. I think Holmberg does too, very underratedly, right? So there's a couple guys in this team, and they're the third heaviest team in the NHL now. So obviously he wasn't talking about just fighting specifically. He's talking about how you play the game and playing a heavy style of game, an intimidating game, a game where you initiate in the playoffs, which they have not done for the longest time. I can't remember. It might have been 2013, at least in the playoffs, a long time since that. So it's going to be a welcome change. I'm excited to see what certain players do under Craig Berube too, heading into the season.
Yeah, that's the most exciting thing is seeing how everybody, Matthew Knies, you mentioned, Nick Robertson is obviously probably the biggest one because of the outroar of him requesting a trade and all these things. And then you have other guys like a lot of young players, even Joseph Wall and just all these other guys, because it's not just Craig Berube. We're talking about Lane Lambert, Mark Savard, Mike Van Ryn, even the guys who stayed over from last year's coaching staff under Sheldon Keefe. They're still going to have to follow a new, just everything is different now under Craig Berube, and it's going to be super exciting to see what happens specifically with a lot of these young guys. And there's a lot of talk about, should Craig Berube spread out the Maple Leafs core four on day one of the job? Anthony Bercelli joined Sportsnet 590, the fan, talking about how these lineups are going to work. And that's one of the biggest question marks that we've been discussing on stream, discussing on videos. Where are these players going to play? Is William Nylander going to fit into the second center spot, which moves John Tavares down to the 3C? We've heard some talk about Mitch Marner being a better fit as a center than William Nylander. You keep William Nylander on the wing. There's so many different talks, and you can see this here. As much as we talk about the attention on Marner and his production, part of it will be about what situations they are put in. Is it more that it's fresh and new, or seeing some newer things, even though it is the same forward group minus Bertuzzi? They better be amazing if they keep things the same. I think Craig Berube is going to change things up, and even Brad Treliving as well, who we know has been high on William Nylander playing the center position. I think there's a lot of changes coming. That's what makes this upcoming training camp into the regular season the most exciting regular season and most anticipated regular season for Leafs fans in like half a decade, in 5+ years, at least for me personally, seeing all these changes, new coaching staff, similar core, but with some younger guys ready to break through, and hopefully with a different scheme and a different GM now, second year for Brad Treliving, and a different coach, maybe it's their time to break out here. It's exciting.
Yeah, I've said it time and time again on the channel that, up until last season, it was a lot of just every time a season started, just get me to April. I just want to get to April because the team was exactly the same. But now we have, a new captain to look forward to. We have a new coach and coaching staff to look forward to, and how they're going to rearrange the lines and how the team plays. It's actually going to be exciting to not only watch game one of the season, but the entire season and how things shake out. I think a lot of Leaf fans, like me included, want Domi on the first line with Matthews, right? That might not happen, right? It's going to be very exciting to see this season where certain guys slot in and how they play and how they adjust as the season goes. And of course, the playoffs. I expect them to make the playoffs, and how will that look differently? I think, in a way, in terms of skill and speed, they may take a step back this year, but if benefits them in the playoffs, I'm all for that. I think they'll definitely still make the playoffs, and they're going to be exciting to watch this year.
Very, very exciting. And it's a bit of a tipping point now for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We said that last year. We said it the year before. We said it the year before. But now, even back in 2020, we were kind of talking about some of the same things. But now that is actually, there's been some changes made finally. The Sheldon Keefe era is over. It's going to be excited to see what Craig Berube can do to hopefully lead this team. And as the captain of the ship, hopefully take him to the promised land. Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. See you soon.